Hi there, I thought I'd like to make a video on the game of Caesar in Alexandria, which is the game I have on my table right now by GMT Games. It's from, 2001, so it's a bit of an oldie and it's a bit of a curiosity. It's in a series, the Great Battles of History, Volume 9, and it's a bit different from the rest of them. I've finished up my game of Lee versus Grant and enjoyed that. It was with a friend of mine. We're thinking to we're going to play it, and then our thoughts naturally turned to the series that spun off that, which is the great campaigns of the American Civil War. But I've read some good and some bad about it. It sort of seems a bit similar in a sense to the Zucker Napoleonic series, in that there's aficionados who buy every single game in the series, and then there's others who say, well, okay, fair enough, it's okay as a game, but there's things that are highly unrealistic in it, such as the combat system, and then and also in the great battles, great campaigns, the problems with supply, the way supply is modelled, cavalry and so forth. So, and also it's a lot more complicated. So I looked at some alternatives. I saw a review mentioning alternative in the Autumn of Glory, and that's in a series by Clash of Arms. I forget the name of the series, but it's again campaigns, American Civil War campaigns, but with fog of war, dummy counters, and instead of hexes you have areas, and it seems a bit more up our street and not as nearly as complicated. So I decided I'd look to buy one of those. Again, the great campaigns, they go for a fair bit, even second hand, €80 and up kind of thing, up to sort of 200 for. The Autumn of Glory goes for €30. So this game of Alexandria had been on my shelf for some time, been meaning to get to play it, and I figured I'd sell it and buy Autumn of Glory. So obviously I want to play it before I sell it. So I started playing it. I put it up on Board Game Geek, and already I have a buyer. So I thought I'd give some coverage of it for others in case you're interested before I have to send it out the door. And I must say, I'm actually liking it. Liking it a bit more than I thought. I was interested in it because I'm interested in the Great Battles of History series, Great Battles of Ancient History, as it were. I have Caesar in Gaul. I didn't like it because I just found the battles too lopsided, too kind of historically accurate, in the sense that the Romans were always going to win and the barbarians were always going to lose. It was just a question of when and where, and so I just found it kind of uninteresting in that sense. It might have been more interesting if the victory points have been kind of skewed so that as the barbarian player you just had to do better than the supposed historical outcome and so forth. And I don't know, it kind of opens up the sort of question about historicity, like, because the claim is that's more historical because the Romans won and they always won, so then they have to always win in the game, kind of thing, or else it's just not based on history and it's fantasy. But I find them so kind of skewed, because the Romans can always trump in activations, and they always kind of have the upper hand. The Gauls, their activation numbers are so low, their TQ numbers are so low that they're only going to do okay if they get a string of very good die rolls. I find that uninteresting. I want, as that commander, to have, even if I can do some things that are ahistorical, to have some ability to have a satisfying game, essentially. So I did get second-hand SPQR, the old version, but again, just because out of interest for the system and to play out the game, see how they go, see if there's any way I could tinker with it. I have simple Great Battles of History, don't like it. It's a different game. It's not it's a different game using the same components, and I just didn't really like it. This one is great. It's not Great Battles of History as per. It's the same system, but tons of it taken out, and it's very simplified. Essentially, the situation you have is the great ancient capital of Alexandria. Cleopatra, there's a Cleopatra marker. So she's here in the holed up in the palace with Caesar, and not quite sure what that is a symbol of Cleopatra on her backside, so to speak. But anyway, they're holed up in the palace. There's the Egyptians under Ganymedes, but I take it those are more or less kind of the Greek and dynasty in Egypt. But anyway, my history's very fuzzy on this. But anyway, they've taken back all this part of Alexandria. Not the Romans are holed up in the palace. There's a causeway over here to the island of Pharos. There's a great lighthouse of Pharos, the seventh wonder of the world at the time. That's held by the Romans. The Romans also have port here, in which their ships start. The ships have various types. These are their holding boxes, so they can hold 1, 2, sometimes 3 unit counters. The Egyptians have similar types: quadremes, quadriremes, quinqueremes, triremes, and they all have various capabilities. Essentially, let's get one the right way up for you. So you have the crew rating, which is kind of like their skill, and the Romans are all 3 or 2. The Egyptians are all 2. There might be 1 or 2 3ers. Yes, there's a 3er. So essentially the Romans outskill the Egyptians. And then you have the movement ratings, the white boxed one, it runs from 7 to 9. That's hexes maximum. And then you have, in the black boxes, you have the is that the ramming attack and defense number, and then you have the unit size, that middle number between those, and you have it like a cruise speed, which has certain benefits, and then you flip it to attack speed, which is more or less the same speed, but you get the attack value, and depending on whether you are cruising or attacking, you can or can't ram, rake, grapple. Then you have obviously missile fire in this age. If you've got missile units on your boats, you can transfer units without grappling, turn around, etc. And you're wanting to grapple if you've got units, and you can board to take control of enemy ships and so forth. Then, and it's all there's. I understand that. I think there's War Galley, which is the module Great Battles of History. This is a lot simplified from that apparently, and it's very sweet and it's easy to do. You use 2d6 for the combat. So, for example, if you've got a ram attack rating as 5, which most of the Romans have, and then the Egyptians have got ram defense of 7 or 6, some of 5. So let's set 6 on 10 to 12 on 2d6. You're going to get the ram. You have some modifiers, and similar for so naval missile fire. You can mount ballistae as well as archer units. You've got the rake, the same. Now that's on the crew rating, not on the black number. But so the Romans have a crew rating of 3. The Egyptians 2, so on a 7 to 12 the Romans will be successful. The Egyptians will be successful on 10 to 12 on the rake. You get some modifiers if you have to go parallel to the enemy ship. If you're heading towards them, it's one way. If you're coming up from behind, it is better. And so you've got rammed ships that catch fire. You can catch this fire can spread to other ships. So those charts cover the ships, and it looks pretty sweet. And then you have the ground units, and the charts for the ground units are all here. And it's very simplified from the Great Battles of History, essentially. So every time you activate, you can either activate one of your secondary leaders and everyone within movement points of his command range. That's his movement, that's his command range. Everyone within movement points of his command range, he can activate them and they do their thing. Or you can activate all your lights, or auxiliaries they're called. So for the Roman auxiliaries it's this bunch of folks, and for the Egyptians it's archers and or artillery. Or you can activate all your fleets, so all galleys and transported units, all of your fleet, or you can activate your leader and the leader, and he moves. Now the main leader, he's got a charisma rating, I haven't actually used them yet, but the charisma's in the middle, yeah. So that could be used in combat. You don't want Caesar really to be used in combat, although he's heroic, because if he dies, it's game over for the Romans. The secondary leaders don't have a charisma rating, so they don't give any benefit in combat. There's a... what's that one? I forget. Anyway, it's not so important. Oh yeah, that's initiative. I forget what that's for. I think you can. It's not so important. But then the number on the side there in blue is the it's 5 for Ganymede and it's 6 for Caesar. That's the number of times they can try to seize activation. So essentially you alternate between activations. The Egyptian starts first. So you either activate the secondary leader. For the Romans that's going to be like a legionnaire leader. They have 3. Or you activate your auxiliaries, including the artillery, or you activate the ships, or one of your leaders moves. And you just alternate, and then you can have a seizure attempt. Oh yeah, that's right. The seizure, I think, will be within the initiative range. If you are successful at the seizure, you get a double move, essentially, and you can only do it that number of times, 5 and 6. Cleopatra has no effect in the game apart from distraction. I'm using it to mark victory points. Sorry, not victory points, but exhaustion levels. So if the Egyptians reach 50 and the Romans reach 55, their army is exhausted and the other side wins. Otherwise, a side wins by holding both the palace and the Hepha Stadium, which is this causeway between the mainland and the island of Pharos, which very interestingly it's got underpasses there and there built for the ships, so the ships can go under there and there, but they're blocked by there, so it creates a very interesting situation when you have the Romans here and the Egyptians there. So the Romans, their legions, they have 8, 8 and 10, I think, cohorts in each of the 3 legions, and the legionnaires have a TQ of 6. If your legionnaire is destroyed and TQ reduces during battle and sort of some fatigue and movement and stuff, that counts for the exhaustion. So essentially, if 10 of the Roman cohort, so that's about a third of their force, is eliminated, the Romans out of the game, and likewise it would be for the Egyptians. Now, the Romans predominate in cohorts. The Egyptians have... so I'll just show you. So the Romans have 3 legions, one with 8, another with 8, and another with 10 cohorts, and then they have some auxiliaries and the artillery. The Egyptians have 24 light infantry, 20 heavy infantry, and a few others. So the Americans basically kind of have... cohorts are better than heavy infantry, and they've got, 26 of them. So on the weapon system matrix, if a Roman cohort is attacking an Egyptian heavy infantry, so best versus best, the Romans get a benefit +1. If the Egyptian heavy infantry are attacking, they get a negative. So that's what you roll the d10, you modify it according to that, and not too many other factors. but things like, position and fatigue and so forth. And then the die roll depends on hits on the attacker 1. This is good. Hits on the defender 3 and a retreat. All the way down to the attacker taking a wallop and the defender not taking much. So the Romans are in the better position sort of strength-wise, but they're the ones sort of being besieged. So the sense I get is essentially what it is about is the Romans, are going to have to take the initiative to capture the causeway, because the Egyptians are not strong enough to assault the palace as the forces stand. And this is my setup, by the way. There's a bit of a limitation on setups, but there's a fair bit of freedom on where you actually place. Some units are dictated, like the artillery, 1 per point and so forth. But I chose where to put, for example, I started with a legion out here. Didn't have to do that, but I did. Similar to some freedom here. So, but the point is that the Romans are heavy here, and the Egyptians are not really strong enough to take that by force. And the Egyptians hold the other place that is wanted, so that it's on the Romans to capture that. Then, whilst sort of conserving the force, so they have to do it in a kind of a deft way that they don't reach exhaustion, they don't lose so many men, whilst the Egyptians will be letting them do that and then trying to take advantage, whittle them down, using their like here we started with half of the Roman legion that started here has moved forward, so the Egyptians kind of had them cordoned with archers. I put archers up front and then some heavy infantry in this block here. So the Romans have moved forwards, trying to push that threat away. The archers retreat, you get reaction fire, so even without having to activate, they can fire, whittling down the Romans a little bit. So TQ's gone down to 4 from he started on 5, he started on 8, he started 7. So whittling them down as they retreat, and then looking for the opportunity to, maybe knock out the odd legionary and so forth. So it seems to be that the Roman is going to be on the offensive, and the Egyptians will be whittling down and looking for the opportunities and gaps, and hopefully overcoming weaker points of the Romans, exploiting any opportunities. And then the thing is, because this is amphibious warfare, as it were, you have beaches here and beaches here, but you can also grapple your ships right on the Hesper Stadium there, and so chuck units onto the Hesper Stadium, actually have battles on there. You can see you have hexes, but most of the scrapping is going on in these points, so it's like 1 movement point, 1 movement point, and here 1, 1, 1. And you can have 1 unit per point and plus an artillery. Or you can bung a whole load of people in the blocks, but it costs all the movement points to move from a block to a point. And it costs more or less half a movement point to move from a point to a block. So you could sort of go 1, well, say you're here, you could go 1, 2, and then the rest of your movement to get in the block. But once you're in a block, you're a bit hampered, so the leader does not have any command control out of a block. So either you can have, like a thin cordon around a block, 1 unit at each point, or you can have a sort of a heavy force in a block. So you get this interesting difference from the usual just, line them up on the hexes and throw them at each other from ancient warfare. It's city fighting. And so that's where the difference comes in. That's where I think they've had to simplify. You don't have to worry about all the rules of how lines work and so forth, because essentially it's like unit against unit. You can have, if like say I'm Egyptian in a block here, the Romans have, say, you can't move it directly from a block to a block. So say the Romans are massed here, they would have to first spread out and then all jump in, converge on the block. So you can have block in block fighting. And it's that kind of excitement of the different what's going on. It's kind of more chaotic, in at least in feel, and you have to have a different sense of how to fight from the other great battles games. Then you're going to want to send some units out, maybe, land a force here, land a force here. Maybe even the Romans, as long as you control the lighthouse, you control these hexes. So the Romans can sort of whiz around there, and the Egyptians can whiz across here. If you have a unit on the overpasses, you control that. So, and also you can control the overpasses by having units on the entries or exits. So the Romans can't get through. So either they have to go the long way around, and that gives the Egyptians more time to kind of organise their force. Maybe some of them they had left. Maybe they load some guys on for using their missile units against the enemy. Maybe they put some ballistae on their ships. The Egyptians only have 2 or 3. They've got Scorpios actually. The Romans have, I think, 4 Scorpios and 1 ballista. There's another one. They got 2 ballista. So there's that kind of decision. Do I weaken my ground force to strengthen my naval thrust? Do I have some just ground force I want to move quickly, move it onto Pharos, take the Hesper Stadium, take that end of it and that end of it, then I control the waters and I can go and burn ships in harbour or what have you. Because the Egyptians, their boats are basically, and their crew are not as good, so it's that a situation I don't really like, because in the sense that they're not evenly matched, so I don't know what to do with the Egyptians. You have to kind of run away, but still, defend yourself. And so the obvious thing was, I started out, half my Egyptians came out to see, essentially to make a lunge. The Romans sent out a few of their force, then they sent out a bit more because the Egyptians had brought out their heavies. The Egyptians turned tail and then blocked the stadium, so now they've essentially kind of held them up. These are shallows or shoals, so there's a chance of running aground, so that does kind of restrict the movement somewhat. So maybe you use a land force and try and take that by storm that way. It's going to be difficult. There's no time limit, and because the battle itself took place over weeks, or maybe a month or something, but weeks, you don't really sort of consider the time. It's just that my activation is maybe 3 weeks, 3 days after the last one, and then your activation is probably going to immediately respond to that. Then we might abstractly consider there's been these return to port, these return, there's a lull, and then someone activates here, and then someone else has to respond. So there's no time limit. It just all depends on the exhaustion, and I don't think exhaustion gets recovered. The rules are only 20 pages long, so it's easy to sort of get up to speed quite quickly. The Egyptians do have a small cavalry contingent. They're not really going to see play because the cavalry cannot enter the city walls. They can't trample down the streets. So they're really only there if, say, the Romans want to land here for some kind of flanking manoeuvre, running up here or whatever, to protect that. So that's it. You've got counters for rammed, aground, crippled, beached, grappled, fouled, etc., captured. And interestingly, you only have this many for TQ must shock. So normally out in the plains, units adjacent to units ordinarily have to take a 2 TQ check, and the defender takes TQ check, the attacker must shock. So when you move close to the enemy, they slam into each other and it starts getting a bit chaotic. In here, you only need the few there because that's only relevant outside the walls. In the walls, essentially, you don't have to attack. I think if you're in the block together, you have to attack, but you wouldn't be in a block together unless that was happening. But adjacents on the streets, on the points, do not have to attack. It's completely your choice. It's a different style of warfare. So without getting into the details of the nitty gritty, I think that's essentially it. I think it's an interesting game. I like it because of the simplifications from the four great battles of history, especially with the activation. You don't have the seizure and the trump and the, can't remember all the terminology, but it's not so involved about trumping and reactivating and so forth. It's just I go, you go, inactivation's not the whole force. And I have 6 opportunities to take a double move and you have 5. And that's it. And then you're moving small groups of units individually and then deciding whether to attack or not in each situation. And you have reaction fire and you have retreat before combat, which gives you TQ hits, but obviously you're retreating. And so I like it, and it's interesting because the first ever video I made was on. Oh, the name slipped me, but it was the great battles of the American Civil War system in Baton Rouge. That's it, in city fighting with American Civil War monitors and boats. So it was, and again, it was a Berg design. Okay, Herman helps with this. I don't know how much his Berg's in his system, but the sense I get is this was Berg's baby, this particular module. And it reminds me very much of Baton Rouge because you have the differences from the regular rules in fighting in the streets. You've got the navies alongside shelling and firing from one to the other in the ancient times, not in the American Civil War times. That's great. And then I also have light division, which is, it's not, you won't have boats involved in that, but again that's going to be a sort of maritime by the sea forces fighting over ports, more in the modern era. So I think probably that's the best that I can give on this right now. It is interesting, and I don't mind that I'm selling it because I kind of get it, and it's okay. I'm looking forward to getting another game to play with a friend. I don't think I would have someone play this, but with me, with so many games around, this is kind of a bit of an oddity, but I think it looks like a delightful one. Over and out.